This is PIX on Politics Daily with Dan Manarino.
Hey there, I'm Henry Rosoff, and welcome to PIX on Politics Daily. Thanks for joining us. As usual, a lot going on in New York City politics. We have the race for mayor. A lot of people talking about the Rent Guidelines Board vote to increase the rent. It's a preliminary vote, but we are diving deeper into that today. But the way that New Yorkers vote, the way that housing is zoned, very well could be on the ballot in addition to the mayor's race. And to parse through all of that and explain why that may be the case, I want to bring in Richard Buery. He is the chair of the New York City Charter Revision Commission. He's also the CEO of Robin Hood, a leading New York City anti-poverty organization. Rich, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you guys put out a preliminary report. First, talk about what is the Charter Revision Commission, what are you tasked with, and what did this report say?
Absolutely. So the Charter Revision Commission is something that is part of the city charter. It essentially allows the mayor to appoint a group of citizens to hear from the public and recommend a set of changes to the city charter, which is essentially our city's constitution. We then get to go out and hear from hundreds of New Yorkers at in-person testimony, through written testimony, hear about what they think New York City needs to be the city we want it to be, and how we can amend the charter to deliver on that promise. We issued, as you said, this week a preliminary report. The staff of the commission issued a preliminary report, which in a sense hears about some of the big themes that we heard during our testimony and describes how we might go about addressing them. It's not final yet, so now that we have the preliminary report, we will hear from many more New Yorkers and probably hear from even more now that there are some ideas on paper. And then eventually in a few months, we will process all that feedback and we will make a set of recommendations, which ultimately will go to the voters to consider in November.
So let's talk about some of the themes that this report highlighted, because I mean, I'm a politics guy, so let's start there. The thing that really jumped out at me is the potential of even year instead of odd year elections and the potential of a completely open primary. First, what are those things? Explain them to those of us at home who are less familiar. And also, could this really happen? Because I feel like this gets talked about year after year and doesn't actually end up happening.
Yeah, well, look, I'll start at the end. Yes, it absolutely could happen if the voters decide it's a good idea and want to approve it. And if they don't, it won't. So ultimately, this is something that the voters get to decide. Just to back up for a second, what we've tried to do through this process is to try to say, how can we make New York City a more inclusive place, a city that works for all New Yorkers? And probably the single item that we heard the most testimony about was about our broken electoral processes. And I say broken because one of the indications of that brokenness is that most New Yorkers don't participate in our political processes. We have very low voter turnout, typically hovering 25%. And part of what we try to do here is think about what are some policy changes that would encourage more people to enter the system. You described two of them. One is moving from odd year to even year elections. And we all know that during even year elections where the governor's on the ballot, the president's on the ballot, there's more activity, more people come out to vote. And so one idea would be that would be a way to encourage more people to participate in deciding who gets to run our city. That is actually not fully up to the city to decide that. It's part of state law, but at least if it goes in the ballot and were adopted, it would then be up to the state to allow us to do it, but the city charter would no longer be an obstacle.
And before you get into open primaries there, the state did actually pass a law enabling this, but it got shot down by the courts. So again, there's process to be had there, but the state has shown some willingness to do this if the city initiates it.
That's right, which is one of the reasons why I say I do think it's absolutely possible. And by the way, it'll also save tens of millions of dollars because it costs a lot of money to run a bunch of elections that very few people participate in. So with just one run in even year elections, we also save money too, which is nothing to scoff at. Open elections is really trying to solve a similar problem because so many New Yorkers feel disaffected from the political system, because there are so many independent voters who now can't vote in the primary. It means that the decisions that really drive who gets to be on the ballot, which is sort of the decisions that are happening in Democratic and Republican primaries, don't involve a very large number of voters, and I think we all think that's not a great thing. Everybody who's part of the city should have a role in deciding who gets to run the city. And so, again, none of these, and I should say, none of the proposals in the preliminary report are final. They're sort of ideas. They're not fully honed proposals, so I can't speak in specifics, but some of the broad ideas involve an open primary, or what's sometimes called a jungle primary, meaning that you would no longer have a separate Democratic primary, you would no longer have a separate Republican primary, you wouldn't have a Democratic primary that Republicans vote in, or a Republican primary that Democrats could vote in. You wouldn't have that. You would have one primary where everyone could run, and the people running would be able to identify their party affiliation. Are you Republican? Are you working families? Are you Democrat? Are you Socialist? Are you Green? Whatever you are, conservative, whatever you are. So that helps voters understand who they're voting for. We continue to build on the success of ranked choice voting. So that would be a ranked choice voting primary. And at the end, some number of candidates would emerge from that. Again, we can decide if it might be 3. But, you can pick a final number. And then you'd have a general election, which would be, depending on the number of voters, would either be just a straight winner, or a majority election, or you can also have ranked choice voting, depending on how many voters you had in the end. But the hope is that you'd have more people participate in the process, and the final names on the ballot would actually be the people who got the most votes, which is not the case now. A Republican candidate can get on the ballot as a Republican, even if that person got fewer votes, got very few votes in the primary because of party registration. So I think
Rich,
some version
if I may, just because I really want to get to housing in our limited time, there was a lot to say about the affordability crisis, particularly at the intersection of housing in the report. But I think most people might just wonder a very simple question: what can revising the city charter do about it? So I'll put that to you. What can revising the charter do to help with this housing crisis?
It's a great question. The affordability crisis, the singular crisis facing the city. I don't think anybody watching this show needs me to explain that fact. But there's plenty of data that would support the fact if you didn't experience it. And make no mistake, the city charter can't solve that entire problem by itself. What the city charter can do is remove some of the obstacles that make it difficult to build affordable housing in the city. And the shortest version of what I could say is that we in the city have a very robust and a good process designed to make sure that local communities and citizens and their elected representatives have a meaningful say in what happens, called ULURP, our land use review process. And I think in many ways that process works very well. But there are some ways in which it doesn't, and I'll give a couple of examples. One is that that process is expensive and time-consuming, which can make a lot of sense for a very big, massive project. If you're going to create Hudson Yards and rezone the entire west side, it makes sense to have a very complex process. But if you're building a 8-unit apartment building near the 2 train, it may not make as much sense to have that kind of process. But the problem is that the process is fundamentally the same. And so part of the question is, are there some kinds of development, maybe affordable housing development, maybe development near transportation hubs, maybe it's development that is of a certain modest size or that meets the other, or is similar to the neighborhood. One of the arguments is that you just shouldn't have to have a complicated process. The other thing that I would say as an overarching idea is people have heard the term member deference. Member deference is not a legal principle, but the reflection of the fact that the city council basically makes a decision on every process. Each one of those building developments is a city council decision.
What you're talking about is any given member in any given district can effectively kill any project, which is not the law, but it is a courtesy that is generally respected.
And so in 16 years, we have not had a housing development adopted by the council over the objection of the council member whose district is placed. And so we think it's very important. I think it's very important for that council member to have a powerful and impactful voice. The question is, should it be a veto? And I would say no. And so part of what we're trying to think about are there other ways that would allow voices that maybe had a broader purview than the local council purview was have a bigger role in that process, citywide, borough president level. Again, not to move the city council and city council members out of the process, urgent and critical, but maybe if there's a dial, maybe to move the dial so that if there is significant opposition from the local council member, there are ways that you could revisit that so that that doesn't become a violence.
Well, Rich, that'll have to do it for our time. Just real quick, if you could, I know you have a number of hearings coming up, but when will an approximate time when you make a decision about what actually ends up on the ballot? Is there a date associated with that yet?
Sometime this summer, as you can imagine, we need to make a decision. The commission will have to vote on something, get it to the city clerk. So sometime this summer. And I would encourage people to please come out and testify. You can submit written testimony online. You can email us at Charter Revision Commission at cityhall.nyc.gov, and we hope people will reach out.
And we'll push some of that information across our platforms as well. Rich, thanks for taking the time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, and that'll do it for this edition of PIX on Politics Daily. You can catch us every day, right here, every weekday, I should say, at 1 p.m. And, of course, the big show Friday at 6:30. Working on a good one. We've got high-profile interviews in both the race for mayor and the race for New Jersey governor. So you want to check that out Friday at 6:30 with a re-air on Sunday morning. But for now, you have a great day.